It was June 2011. Navy SEAL training was underway. That day, there was an extremely difficult and mentally grueling underwater test. This test had the power to completely break a candidate not just physically but mentally as well. The narrator of our story failed that test. After the test ended, the instructor told him to get out of the pool and sit in the corner with the other failed candidates. In that corner, several candidates were already sitting in a line, with their backs to the pool, facing forward. The narrator got out of the pool. His body was completely exhausted, his lungs were burning, and his legs felt heavy. He went and sat in that corner. But after sitting down, he did something peculiar. He intentionally started panting very loudly, making his chest heave up and down. It was as if he wanted to show everyone just how difficult his test had been. This dramatic behavior lasted only 2 seconds. Suddenly, someone from the side turned his head and looked directly at him. This person was a big 18-year-old kid from Wisconsin. His name was Ephraim Matos. Clenching his teeth, Ephraim simply said, "Shut up! Everyone's hurting here." Then he turned his face forward again. At first, the narrator felt anger. Being spoken to like that in front of everyone felt insulting. But a few moments later, he realized that Ephraim was not wrong. The expectation from those who come to become Navy SEALs is that they will not just think about their own pain, they must think about the team. There is no time here to cry over oneself. In that single moment, with that one sentence, Ephraim Matos taught a lesson that the narrator could never forget. And in the following years, almost everyone in the Navy SEAL teams remembered this boy, because Ephraim became memorable not just for that day. Looking at this small incident from the outside, it might seem insignificant. An 18-year-old boy told his fellow candidate to shut up. But the philosophy inside it was extremely profound. Navy SEAL training is one of the toughest military trainings in the world. Situations are created in this training where a person's body and mind both want to break down. There's no sleep, no rest, and constant physical and mental pressure at every moment. In this situation, many people center everything around their own suffering. They think only they are hurting, and only their situation is difficult. This self-centeredness makes a SEAL weak. What Ephraim said that day meant, no one is comfortable here. Everyone is in the same pain. Therefore, there is no point in displaying one's own suffering. Instead, keep your head down, do the work, and move forward. The narrator later admitted that this lesson served him throughout his entire military career. Whenever he fell into difficult situations, Ephraim's words, spoken through clenched teeth, would float into his mind. And not just the narrator, almost everyone in the Navy SEAL teams remembered this incident. Because Ephraim Matos would do something in the following years that would make headlines in major news media around the world. And when that happened, everyone would say, "Yes, that is Ephraim. That is his character. The action completely matches the person we saw by that pool." The year was 2012. After crossing that difficult path of training, both the narrator and Ephraim Matos finally graduated as Navy SEALs. Becoming a Navy SEAL does not just mean getting a certificate. It is the end of an extraordinary journey and the beginning of a new one. Those who can complete this training are considered among the most skilled and trained warriors in the world. This graduation moment was special for both of them. Just a year ago, they were sitting by the pool, holding the pain of failure in their hearts. Now, they were full members of that same team. The words Ephraim said by that pool, "Everyone's hurting here," seemed to find a new meaning on this graduation stage. Those who moved forward holding that pain within themselves were the ones standing here. The narrator and Ephraim crossed this path as brothers in arms. The bond formed between them was not just of friendship. It was a deep bond of respect and trust between two people who had crossed the same difficult path. After graduation, the narrator and Ephraim were sent to separate teams. The narrator was assigned to an East Coast SEAL team and Ephraim was sent to a West Coast team. This is very normal in military life. Those who stay together in training cannot always remain in the same team. They are sent to different places according to the country's needs. The narrator joined his new team on the East Coast and Ephraim on the West Coast. Their paths separated. Communication decreased. In the busy rush of military life, regular contact eventually almost stopped. For the next 5 years, the narrator did not see Ephraim. Both were walking separate paths. But the moment of introduction, that lesson by the pool, was never forgotten. Then one day, the narrator suddenly saw Ephraim on the television screen, on the soil of Iraq, standing behind a tank. Shortly after joining the West Coast team, Ephraim was deployed to Afghanistan. This was his first deployment to a combat zone. He had trained as a Navy SEAL, and now he was facing real war. The SEAL team's missions in Afghanistan were diverse and dangerous. Village raids, intelligence gathering, searching for enemies every day brought new challenges. On one mission, Ephraim's team was returning after visiting a village. The team was crossing a vast open field. Ephraim was at the very back of the team. The rear position is extremely important. The person in this position is responsible for watching if any threat is coming from behind. Before entering the village that day, a deeply concerning discovery had been made. A children's backpack was lying in the middle of the road. The team inspected it. The bag was filled with explosives. It was a bag used by time bombers or suicide bombers. Fortunately, no one was injured. The explosives were defused, but from then on, the entire team became alert, especially when seeing children's backpacks. It was against this backdrop that the most terrifying moment of Ephraim's life arrived while returning from the mission. After completing the mission, the team was returning across the field. Ephraim was at the back, guarding the team. Occasionally, he looked behind to ensure no one was following them. At one point, as he looked back, Ephraim saw two small girls running out of the village. They could not have been more than 5 and 7 years old. They were running towards the team. Ephraim's eyes immediately went to their backs. Both girls were wearing backpacks, and those bags looked exactly like the bag in which explosives had been found that very morning. The situation became clear in Ephraim's mind. The Taliban was using innocent children as suicide bombers. These girls probably did not even know what was in their bags. They might have been told that they would get something if they took it there. Ephraim started screaming, "Stop! Go back! If you come any closer, I will have to shoot." But the two girls were not stopping. They kept running. Ephraim looked at their faces. Tears were falling from their eyes. They were crying. They were afraid. It was clear that they were innocent. They were children. But what the situation was dictating was entirely different. Ephraim raised his rifle. He took off the safety. He aimed at one of the girls. He began to squeeze the trigger. Right at that moment, the two girls suddenly stopped. It was as if they understood what was about to happen next. They turned around and ran back towards the village. Ephraim took his finger off the trigger. He put the safety back on. He lowered his rifle and let out a long, heavy breath. Ephraim did not shoot that day. But that moment became etched in his heart. Ephraim had seen many things in the combat zone and had faced many difficult situations. But of all the wars and dangers he had seen in that entire Afghanistan mission, this incident of the two innocent girls had the greatest impact on him. When he went to sleep at night, the crying faces of those two girls would float before his eyes. Even while working during the day, that scene would come to mind. How could someone send a 5 or 7-year-old child as a suicide bomber? What heart could be so cruel? These questions haunted Ephraim, and from these questions a deep change began to take place within him. He believed in the American government's mission, but at the same time he felt that military operations alone were not enough. More needed to be done for the innocent people trapped in these conflict zones. The way those two girls were used, they were just victims. Their lives were being destroyed like this because of the conflict. After returning to America, Ephraim was no longer the same as before. That mission, the faces of those girls, those haunting questions combined, they made him start looking for a new path. Upon returning to America, Ephraim began to look into various conflict zones around the world over the next few years. Where are the most innocent people in danger? Where are civilians being exploited and killed the most? In this research, one place kept coming to the forefront repeatedly. That place was Iraq. A new terrorist organization called ISIS had seized power there and was carrying out unprecedented atrocities on innocent civilians. ISIS was not just fighting a war, they were capturing entire cities and holding civilians hostage. They were selling people into slavery, committing genocide in the name of religion, and turning children into soldiers. This information struck Ephraim's heart. He began to decide in his mind that he had to do something for these people. The training he had received and the skills he had acquired as a Navy SEAL could be used to help these people. The only question was, how? In early 2017, Ephraim's Navy contract expired. This is a time of major decision in every soldier's life, to stay or to leave. If he stayed in the Navy SEALs, there was security, benefits, and the opportunity to work for the country. But in Ephraim's mind was the face of those two girls in Afghanistan and the news of ISIS's atrocities in Iraq. Millions of innocent people were waiting for help. Ephraim decided he would no longer stay in the Navy. He would not renew his contract. He would return to civilian life, but not to retire. Rather, he would go to Iraq to stand by those innocent people. This decision might seem strange to many. Leaving a Navy SEAL job to voluntarily go into an even more dangerous situation, but to Ephraim it was completely natural. He knew what he had to do. He contacted a foreign volunteer group working in Iraq through social media. This group was providing humanitarian aid to civilians. Ephraim asked, "Can I join?" The answer came immediately. "Yes, we will gladly accept a Navy SEAL." Within just a few days of making the decision, Ephraim sold his house. He packed a bag of clothes, took his passport, and boarded a plane alone, heading for Iraq. There were no troops with him, no government support, just him, his training, and his absolute resolve. Here, it is necessary to pause for a moment. To understand his bravery, one must understand the difference between going to a war zone as a Navy SEAL and going as a civilian. If you go to Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL, the entire American military power is behind you. If the team is in danger, airstrikes can be requested. Help can be called. If injured, a special medical team will come to rescue you in any situation. If captured, America will try to bring you back. But if you go to Iraq as a civilian volunteer, there is none of this. If in danger, you have to fight for yourselves. If injured, you have to save yourselves. If captured, no one will even know. Ephraim knew all these risks. Because of being a Navy SEAL, he understood better than others how much danger was there. And yet he went, because he felt that his presence was needed there. In March 2017, Ephraim arrived in Iraq. Welcoming him at the airport was an American named Sky. Sky was a strong, tattooed man in his mid-30s. He was a former Marine and had been deployed to Iraq before, so he knew the area well. Sky drove Ephraim to the volunteer team's safe house in the city. There, Ephraim was introduced to the head of the team. His name was Dave. This man in his 50s was a former Army Special Forces operative. He had worked in various conflict zones around the world over the past few decades. Dave told Ephraim that of all the places he had worked in the world, the torture of civilians by ISIS in Iraq was the most horrifying. He had never seen civilians being systematically killed and tortured like this anywhere else before. Hearing these words made Ephraim's decision to come even stronger. He had come to the right place. A few days later, Ephraim, Sky, Dave, and several other American volunteers left the city in a convoy, heading towards the rural areas in the west. Their destination was Mosul, a massive city that ISIS had captured 3 years prior. The convoy consisted of armored ambulances. They had to cross multiple military checkpoints along the way. Most checkpoints were controlled by the Iraqi army, but occasionally there could be ISIS checkpoints as well. Ephraim and his comrades were all fair-skinned Americans. They would be immediately identified at an ISIS checkpoint and considered enemies. Therefore, whenever a vehicle slowed down at any checkpoint, everyone would grip their weapons tightly and mentally prepare for hand-to-hand combat. But fortunately, they did not face any ISIS checkpoints on the entire path. They reached the outskirts of Mosul safely and joined a unit of the Iraqi army. Dave already had a relationship with this unit from before. After joining the Iraqi army unit, Ephraim and his team spent their first month in the areas around Mosul providing humanitarian aid. They delivered food to civilians. They provided medical treatment to the sick and injured. They helped families displaced due to the conflict. These tasks are not as thrilling as direct fighting, but to Ephraim, this was the most important work. Because these people were the direct victims of the war, they did not take any side. They were just trying to survive. Every day, Ephraim saw the faces of people whose lives had been destroyed by ISIS, families separated, homes ruined, no food. But there was still a light of survival in their eyes. In this first month, Ephraim realized that he had made the right decision. Working for these people, this was where he belonged. As soon as the first month ended, everything changed. Iraqi military leaders decided that it was now time to liberate Mosul from the hands of ISIS. This was a massive military operation. Multiple units had to work together. The plan was that the main Iraqi army would enter Mosul city directly and take back territory from ISIS inch by inch. On the other hand, the unit that Ephraim and the others were with was given the responsibility of liberating the villages around Mosul from ISIS. At this moment, Ephraim and his volunteer comrades suddenly turned from humanitarian aid workers into direct participants in the frontline combat. This was Ephraim's first war experience as a civilian. He had fought as a Navy SEAL with the entire American military power behind him. This time, there was nothing behind him. Ephraim's first civilian combat experience occurred during a mission to liberate a village. The village was under ISIS control. To move forward towards the village, they had to cross an active minefield. Bombs were buried under the ground. One step on them meant an explosion. Ephraim crossed that minefield. There were close explosions at least twice, but he moved forward. After crossing the minefield and reaching the village, house-to-house searches began. ISIS fighters could be hiding in every home. Opening every door carried the unknown of what lay inside. Ephraim and the other volunteers began clearing the houses one by one. This entire experience was captured on camera. Entering one house, Ephraim and Dave saw weapons lying on the floor but no ISIS fighters. They began to search. Suddenly, a piece of plywood on the floor caught their eye. Moving it revealed a large hole below. Going down through that hole led to a massive underground tunnel system. ISIS used these tunnels to escape from battles. Without any hesitation, Ephraim and Dave went down into the tunnel. No night vision. No backup. Just the two of them, with flashlights and weapons in hand. They ran forward in the completely dark tunnel. There could be ISIS fighters ahead, so they advanced while occasionally throwing grenades. After running quite a bit, they reached a large cave. There were walls on all four sides and no way forward. But raising the flashlight up, they saw another tunnel entrance at the top of the wall. A ladder would be needed to reach it, but there was no ladder. Ephraim and Dave realized that the ISIS fighters had gone up with a ladder and then pulled it up so that no one could follow them. They came outside and informed the Iraqi army. The army brought a bulldozer and completely sealed off that entrance. Muffled explosion sounds drifted up from under the ground that night. The ISIS fighters realized they had received a living grave, and they committed suicide by triggering explosions themselves. In May, the situation changed again. The main Iraqi army units inside the city became trapped in a northern area. The last few ISIS fighters had made bunkers in the ruins and were fighting fiercely. Resistance was so intense that the army could not advance. They needed armored vehicles and tanks, and Ephraim's unit was an armored unit. They had armored cars and tanks. On May 4th, Ephraim and the volunteers got into their armored vehicles. Ahead was a massive convoy of dozens of tanks and armored vehicles. There was a field on the west side of Mosul. The city lay on the other side of the field. As the massive convoy began to move forward, a terrifying attack started from the city. Heavy machine guns, rockets, mortars attacks were coming from all directions simultaneously. ISIS knew they were coming and was sitting prepared with full arrangements. Entering the city, booby-trapped cars began to explode in the streets. Fire and smoke were everywhere. One's ears felt like they would close up from the sound of machine guns and rockets. Amidst this terrifying situation, the civilians trapped inside Mosul began to flee. They got an opportunity outside forces had arrived. Fleeing now might save them, but ISIS knew that the civilians were their shields. Because they were there, direct bombing could not be carried out in Mosul. Therefore, as people began to flee, ISIS started shooting at them. In front of Ephraim, men, women, and children began to fall in the street from gunfire. He and his comrades tried to return fire, but the ISIS fighters were hidden so well in various buildings that they could not even be seen. Then, Ephraim and his team made a decision. They would go out into the open themselves to draw the attention of ISIS. They would take this risk upon themselves so that the civilians could escape. For the next 3 days, they did exactly that. They kept themselves in the line of fire to give people the chance to flee, while simultaneously providing medical treatment to injured civilians and soldiers. Ephraim later said that he had seen war in Afghanistan as a Navy SEAL and had fought in Iraq too. But after entering inside Mosul, he saw things that his brain could not accept. Humans could hurt other humans like this. He later wrote a book titled The City of Death about this experience. Over the next few weeks, Ephraim and his team established a medical care center in a ruined building in the southern part of Mosul. From this center, they provided treatment day and night to injured civilians and soldiers. People were coming with gunshot wounds and injuries from bombs. Ephraim and his comrades helped as much as they could. At the same time, the rest of the Iraqi army was trying to advance north to break the last ISIS positions. Every day at that center, Ephraim saw human suffering. Everyone from children to the elderly came. While treating them, Ephraim saw infinite exhaustion in their eyes. The exhaustion of living under ISIS for 3 years. June 1st. On that day, the number of injured at the care center suddenly increased abnormally. All day and all night, people were arriving one after another. Everyone was shot or otherwise injured. Ephraim and his team were busy managing the situation. But they noticed that the injured people were behaving strangely. Everyone was in shock. No one was speaking. It was learned from a few people that a massacre had taken place somewhere nearby. But due to language barriers and the pressure of the volume of patients, details could not be known. The next morning, Ephraim and the others decided to advance north to find out what had happened. In the morning, Ephraim and his team left the care center and came to a large intersection 1 block north. There was a large concrete wall there that was hiding them from ISIS's view. ISIS was in the street ahead. There was a burned hospital on that street from where they could observe this intersection. But being behind the wall, they could not see Ephraim and his team. Ephraim cautiously peeked towards the street from the corner of the wall, and what he saw left him stunned. Dozens upon dozens of human corpses were scattered in the street. Yesterday, a group of people had tried to escape from the city. They were running in front of that burned hospital. ISIS fired at everyone from there. More than 200 people were killed. Men, women, children, they spared no one. This was the reason for yesterday's flood of injured people. Those who did not die were the ones who had come to the care center. Scanning that horrifying scene in the street, Ephraim's eyes got stuck on one place. There was a pile of about 20 to 30 corpses in the street. There was movement in that pile. Someone was alive. Ephraim looked closely. A little girl. She was trying to hide herself under her dead mother's clothes. Beside her were 2 more injured adult men. They were injured but alive. Ephraim began calling out to them. He told them to come towards him. But none of them could move. Having stayed inside a pile of corpses for the past 24 hours, they had gone completely into shock. Ephraim realized that if no one went, these 3 would die. Either ISIS would kill them, or they would die from shock and injuries. They had to be rescued. Ephraim and his team went to the Iraqi army and asked for approval for a rescue operation. The plan was that an Iraqi tank would advance directly down that street towards the hospital. Behind the tank would be an Iraqi Humvee. Inside the Humvee would be Ephraim and the volunteers. The tank would act as a shield. When the Humvee arrived beside the pile of corpses, Ephraim and the others would get out, pick up the girl and the 2 men, and get back into the Humvee. Then both vehicles would back away. The American artillery unit was asked to fire smoke bombs, which would block ISIS's vision. After the plan was finalized, just as they were about to get into the Humvee, the driver of the Humvee said, "I will not go. It is not safe." Ephraim and his team tried to explain. There was no time. The smoke bombs would be fired at a specific time. If that opportunity was missed, it would not come again, and these 3 people would die. But the driver did not agree. Then Ephraim and his team made an extraordinary decision. They would go without the Humvee, on foot, behind the tank. The driver of the tank was agreed. The hatch closed. Ephraim and his comrades lined up behind the tank. Then they turned the corner and stepped onto the street directly towards that burned hospital where ISIS was hiding. A few minutes later, as planned, smoke bombs were fired from the American artillery. As the layer of smoke fell, ISIS began to shoot blindly. Bullets, rockets, mortars attacks were coming from all sides. Ephraim later said that he was trying to become as small as possible behind the tank, and he was so afraid that he felt like vomiting. The tank moved forward past the pile of corpses. Right at that moment, Ephraim stepped out and laid down cover fire towards ISIS. Dave and another volunteer ran out and brought the girl and 1 man behind the shelter of the tank. But the other injured man could not walk. They found a metal sheet from the ground, lifted him onto it, and began to pull him. The tank began to move backward. Everyone was advancing. Suddenly, the injured man fell off the metal sheet directly in the path of the tank's wheel. The tank would not stop. There was no communication with the tank driver. Without thinking, Ephraim leaped. He grabbed the injured man and rolled him out of the path of the tank's wheel. The tank passed beside them. But now Ephraim and that injured man were outside the cover of the tank. The smoke had cleared. ISIS could see them. Ephraim looked at that man. Their eyes met. That man could not move by himself. He was seriously injured. Ephraim knew that it would not be possible to lift him quickly without getting killed himself. Ephraim held his hand. He shook his head. He said, "I am sorry." Then he leaped back behind the tank. Right at that moment, a volley of bullets hit exactly where Ephraim had been standing. That injured man died at the hands of ISIS a short while later. Shortly after returning behind the tank, Ephraim suddenly fell. There was terrible pain in his right leg. He had been shot in the leg. But he fell right in front of the tank's wheel. The tank was coming backward. A surge of adrenaline rushed through his body. Ephraim stood up and went limping forward behind the tank. There was a large wound in his leg, but he did not stop. Finally, they came near the corner. They had to cross a bit of open street to get from this side to the other, but the smoke was gone. ISIS knew someone was there and was waiting. No one was responding from the other side. The message was not reaching the Iraqi army. The sound of gunfire was everywhere. In a moment of madness, Ephraim made a run for it. He crossed that open space. Bullets were coming, but they did not hit him. Reaching the other side, he told the Iraqi soldiers, "Send an armored Humvee. Bring the girl and the people over there." A few seconds later, the Humvee went. It brought the girl and the others. The Iraqi soldiers shouted in celebration. Ephraim was taken to a care center in the south by an armored ambulance. A doctor bandaged his leg. Afterward, Ephraim was laid on a cot. Lying down, Ephraim looked to the side. Just 2 beds away, sitting on a cot, was the girl he had rescued. She was looking at the ground. Her hair was messy. Her mind was blank with shock. A little later, a doctor came and gave the girl food and water. The girl ate hungrily. Ephraim just kept looking. The doctor came to Ephraim and said, "Her name is Demoa. She is 4 years old. She is okay." After the doctor left, Ephraim pulled his hat over his face and cried. Ephraim did not speak directly to Demoa. She was afraid of everyone, so he let her stay in her own space. He was later learned that Demoa was reunited with her surviving family, and she is doing well. After the injury, Ephraim was sent back to America. He learned that the rescue operation had been captured on camera by a filmmaker who was documenting ISIS war crimes. That video spread online, and major news media around the world broadcasted Ephraim's story. The narrator saw that news in his Virginia office and immediately understood, yes, that is Ephraim, the person who said by the pool that everyone's hurting here. He never lived just for himself. The gunshot wound in his leg was not fatal. He recovered within a few months, and after recovering he went to Burma to work in another conflict zone. Ephraim established an organization of his own called Stronghold Rescue and Relief. Its goal is to protect and assist families in conflict zones. The core principle of this organization was, all that is needed for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.